Howdy. Next topic, cybersecurity risk assessment and ethics. Boy, is this a tough topic. So, what's my motivation? Well, in December 7th of 2015, while I was still at the University of Houston, Gene Spafford from Purdue Sirius, which is, by the way, is a great resource if you're not on the sirius.purdue.edu website for cybersecurity, came and gave a talk at Texas A&M University. I drove up from Houston for it. And he began to talk about employing deception as a defensive tactic. Now, I had heard this before, okay? But he opened my eyes to some research that was going on at Purdue on false password tables. So, for instance, you would have a password table in your system, but the actual password, when the username entered the password, to get into the system would go through firmware, and it was through an XOR. So the actual password that unlocked to get you in the system was not the password in the table. If there was a hacker that attempted to break in, then you knew that your password table had been compromised. It was an interesting area of research. Another similar thing was research that was making it look as if patches were not installed when they were. So it was almost like a honeypot thing. You know, hey, I'm vulnerable. There's some vulnerabilities here in my system, but in reality, the patches had been installed. So this was a way to kind of trap hackers, to find out their means, how they were getting in, but yet protect your system. There was some other deceptive network defenses. I've got a couple papers on this if you're interested. There's been a lot going on, mainly because a few weeks ago, President Trump's national cyber strategy was announced, and in that strategy was our forward defense, which is a new strategy. We will go forward defense against the critical infrastructure of our adversaries, or those we think are our adversaries. And forward defense is a euphemism for offensive, going on the offensive. And now we've seen this with Facebook, Cambridge Analytica. So my idea is, when I listened to Dr. Spafford, who goes by Spaff, talking about this and this various research at Purdue, and I started looking into it, got more motivated about ethics, not just in cybersecurity, by the way, throughout our computer science and engineering curricula. There's a good Fast Company article about the lack of ethics in Silicon Valley, the entrepreneur community. There's a growing emphasis. But of course, this lecture, we're just going to talk about ethics in cybersecurity. Don't confuse ethics with the law. You can be completely legal and unethical. And some laws are unethical. So ethics, think, is your moral compass. Are you doing what's right? The issue becomes, my moral compass may not align with your moral compass. And our culture dictates a lot of how we feel about this, and how we act about this, and how we internalize our ethics, and that may be in conflict with other cultures. So one aspect of this that I want to use as an example, and by all means, this is not the only example, is this new hacking back mentality. The active defense, or as Secretary Bolton said, forward defense. How do we ethically figure out when we can hack back? So by this I mean, if we have a clear definition or a clear feeling of what defensive operations are, firewalls, encryption, intrusion detection systems, that's within a boundary. We know. And then somewhere out there, we know things that are bad to do. Hack in, plant malware, destroy data, disrupt operations. The ethical issues come between those two. Just like with the Urswat's passwords of Spaff and the Purdue and the phony patching and this other network defense, there was some discussion and some controversy. Was this offensive or was this defensive? You know, where do you draw the line? That's where your ethics are. So is it ethical to destroy a hacker, to publicly identify a hacker, to destroy stolen data, to plant false data? Is it ethical to have revenge? As opposed to just that passive model. And by the passive model, I mean something where we know we can do whatever we want to protect our network boundaries. So here's the risk of something like this. We start a bigger cyber war than we intended. We think we are an individual or a company, and we are being hacked by an individual or a company, and it turns out we are being hacked by a nation state. And suddenly the old thing about don't take a knife to a gunfight becomes don't take a knife to a fight where the adversary has an air force at its call, let's say. So we may start a bigger cyber war. We may not accurately make the proper attribution. So we attack proxies. I think you're attacking me. I'm going to come back on you. I feel I'm ethically, morally, and perhaps legally correct to do so. But in the end, you were innocent. You were being spoofed. Gee, sorry I disrupted operations, destroyed your data, planted malware. Then there's the ethical question. Is this effective? And who should be doing this? Currently, these attacking back techniques are illegal in the CFAA and the Wiretap Act. There has been proposed amendments to the CFAA to allow hacking back. I'm against it by entities or individuals. I think hacking back should only be done at the federal government level, the Department of Defense, Homeland Security. That's a personal opinion. But if you are out there and you'll ever get caught, you could be like poor Aaron Schwartz, who committed suicide after he was indicted under the CFAA because the punishment would have been so draconian. And as I said, if you're going to get caught, these are probably the two best laws you'll be tried under. So we go to the attribution. How is it done? Well, you analyze the TTP, the tactics, something and practices. Gosh, it's terrible. I forgot the acronym. The code, the signatures, machine learning code. But I want to make this point. Yes, I am a lawyer, but I'm also a PhD in computer science. This attribution is not to evidentiary standards, okay, on a lot of reasons. So you take these multiple sources, and at the end, you make a really good guess, right? And the other issue from a legal standpoint is if you're a hacker, you're an individual or an entity attacking, and by entity I mean a business or something, or a group of people together, it's a law enforcement response. But if it's a nation state level of hacking, funded by China, funded by Russia, funded by the US, right? Whoever, if it's a nation state, then that is an act of aggression, and you can have an acceptable military style response. Now, again, there's some nuances in this, and I'm not teaching law and policy under the Talon 2.0 manual for cyber operations. We'll leave that for when you take law and policy. But here's the important thing. Nation-state attacks allow for escalation, but attacks by individuals and entities do not. And then you have the complication of the Yahoo attack a few years ago, and was that a nation state or individuals? Most feel it was Russia as a nation state. Russia said, no, we had a couple of bad guys. Yeah, these two guys did it. Nothing to see here, move on. So here's what our biggest problem is now. Our current threats are intellectual property theft and our attacks on critical infrastructure. We've seen the National Cyber Strategy published in September. We've seen a different response now, policy set by the United States government. It is going to affect all of us in this forward defense. We have to worry about accurate attribution. We have to worry about what the boundaries are for defense versus offensive. We have to worry about all this. And again, I'm using this as one example, the biggest example I can think of right now for ethics and cybersecurity. But here's my observation. I have 3 professional licenses. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Texas. I'm a licensed attorney in the state of Texas, and I'm a licensed patent attorney with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. 3 licenses, 3 license numbers, 3 set of professional standards. If you hire me as a PE or a lawyer and you don't like the work I've done, you can go report me for those licenses. We don't have that in cybersecurity. We don't have that doctor, lawyer, licensed professional engineer, anything like that. We have no standard code of ethics. Now, I may disagree with some of the ethics that's on me by the bar, State Bar of Texas. However, I am bound by them. There's no such code of ethics for cybersecurity. And then, of course, we always get into lack of jurisdiction and what's right in this culture is not right in that culture. Excuse me. And conflict of laws, which means hey, what if one country says it's this way and another country saying that way, and you can both be jurisdictions, or sometimes the absence of laws. And as I said, don't confuse legality with ethics. Okay, so I've got a couple examples here. And at the bottom of the slides, I put the references. Brian Krebs is a journalist who writes about this, and he outed a hacker, a Russian, and who was sent to prison for 18 months in Italy, and apparently it was a terrible prison. Sorry, my fingers are ahead of me. It was a terrible prison, even though it was in Italy. Before he was extradited, he's now in a New Jersey federal prison. Well, as you can expect, Sergey here did not take this well. So he sent on the dark web, bought drugs and had them sent to Mr. Krebs' home, and then he called a 911 into the Chicago area and said, my neighbor is dealing drugs. And Brian Krebs, luckily, had by outing him, had access to his email, realized what he was doing, went to the police and said, I don't sell drugs, here's the whole deal. Now, obviously, would not recommend you do this, but you have to understand that for some people, this seems completely ethical. Our ethics come from our culture, come from how we were raised, come from our business environment. So Sergey here, he's kind of upset this guy's outing him, and I think this all happened, of course, before he went to jail, but later on he sent Mr. Krebs a Happy New Year, Merry Christmas with best regards. He had apparently had a epiphany in prison, which, quite frankly, I would not trust, but whatever. I'll give you another case that's more problematic. So PutterPanda was a Chinese hacker group. There's a company called CrowdStrike, and they out hackers. Now, it is a company. It is not the government. So if you look to the left in this picture, you can see that this particular man, Chinese individual, lined up his favorite beverages on social media. But if you look way in the back, you can see the pointed top of what looks like a hat. And by the way, I invite you to go to CrowdStrike and find this. They have the complete report. So CrowdStrike looks at that hat, analyzes that hat, thinks it's this guy, and it's in the military. Then they do some more analysis. This man took pictures of his girlfriend in front of a building that looked like a government building, and on Google Maps you could see it had a lot of antenna and radar and all this. And then something else he did, but the GPS was spoofed, and on social media it would have been in the middle of a river. So basically CrowdStrike, again a company, decides that this is the guy, this is the infamous hacker out of China. He's military from his hat. Military and police are the same. They get his name, date of birth, his programming skills, his, doing good cyber forensics, came through and analyzed it, and then they outed him. Now, CrowdStrike is a company. It is a company. It was a company that claimed that Hillary Clinton's servers were compromised by the Russians. I'm not saying the claim was true or false, but it was not the FBI. It was a company called CrowdStrike. This is what CrowdStrike does. So they put this on the internet, they identified this person, and they said, this is PutterPanda, he's part of the PutterPanda, and basically within 48 hours, all traces of this man and his girlfriend disappeared. Social media accounts were gone, they were physically gone. He was either shot, executed, or put into prison for treason for allowing himself to be outed. My question to you, ethical or not? So when we talk about ethics, we talk about rules of behavior based on what is morally good and bad. We have our personal ethics. We have our business ethics. Most of your ethics derive from when you're a child, what your parents passed on to you. Business ethics is different. Business ethics, violating personal ethics, lie, cheat, or steal. I always say the best ethics is the Aggie Code. Don't lie, cheat, or steal, okay? Business ethics is similar, but on a bigger scale. It has to do with governance, insider trading, bribery, discrimination, and the like. So when we talk about business ethics, we talk about those cultural norms. So for instance, if your personal ethics are in contradiction with your business ethics rule, maybe there's a certain group of people I don't like. That may be wrong. That is wrong. I can't take that into the workplace. Okay? So my personal ethics, maybe I'm very religious and I believe in certain religious beliefs, but I can't take that into the business place and force that rigidity and judgmental maybe attitude on others, right? So business ethics trumps personal ethics, but business ethics have to be ethical as well. My observation is technology has now just totally disrupted ethical standards. I'm on committees that say, how are we going to, when we have AI and robotics and driverless cars and we're making decisions and we're making healthcare decisions and we're doing all this by software, who's responsible? Who's liable? Who's going to make those decisions? My car is an autonomous vehicle and it can either kill my passenger or hit a pedestrian. Which is ethical? Which is right? Which is wrong? Who's going to make that decision? The software coder? The culture? Who's going to set these ethical standards now for, as we see in data and privacy, the holders, the owners, the possessors, the recipients of data? So once again, I wish I could give you some black letter law, as we call it. Black letter ethics. Here's what you do that's right. Here's what you do that's wrong. The point of this lecture is to make you feel uncomfortable, is to make you start to question hacking back, is to make you start wondering how we introduce better ethical standards into technology. So as I said, it's usually formed by personal code, by your workplace school culture. You'll hear people say they did, this thing at college, maybe this happened. Well, that was the group mentality. Well, that was setting certain ethics, right? We do have a Computer Ethics Institute. We do have IEEE and ACM. We are looking, those professional organizations are looking at updating ethics. Most of them have not been updated since the 90s, before there was the internet. It's still don't lie, cheat, steal, treat people with respect, but how do you get into these gray areas? And then you have two schools of thought. Take the old ethics with a new twist, or we should have global shared ethics, which I think is impossible. Our cultures are different. For some years of my life, I had partners in the Asian countries and Japan and the like, and it was a different way to do business. Their business ethics, as was explained to me when I took a class at the University of Texas on this, their business ethics are based on art of war. So, lie, cheat, or steal, I lie, I cheat, I steal, and you buy it, your problem. Whereas we like to think in the West, we treat with respect. Now, I'm not saying this is the way it's really done. This was what was taught in this class. But there are some cultures where don't share our cultural ethics. So I want you to be sure, and we won't go into this in detail. I'm just going to put this here to whet your appetite to sign up for Law and Policy. The difference between law and ethics. Law is man-made. It's a legal force. We have all these things. Do we have standing? Do we have case of controversy, statute of limitations, jurisdiction, evidence standards? Right? There's U.S. laws. There's criminal versus civil law. There's international laws. That's not ethics. Ethics is what is right. And I always like to put this in here because I like to define law as a body of rules of conduct of binding legal force and effect, as is here, prescribed, recognized, and enforced. But when you look at the Black's legal definition of law, it's a typical law. They have to give you way too many words. I'm going to leave it here. I've listed these as laws that are in effect for privacy. I should have taken this out of this since this is ethics, but I guess I left this one in by mistake. This is just a list for you right now. We don't go through this much in risk. And when you do a risk assessment, when you know risk, you have to worry about governance and compliance. Certain laws that affect certain domains, the students and the health, and these others that I said you could get in trouble for hacking back. Wiretap and CFAA are both criminal and civil. You have all these laws that come into effect. That's just the way it is, okay? I am going to leave it at that and probably start there on the privacy lecture. Thank you for your time.